Last week we read about Noach. This week we're talking about Avraham. Avraham actually knew Noach. They knew each other. When Noach passed away, Avraham sat Shiva, mourned his passing. Avraham was 58 years old when Noach passed away. The difference between them is very significant. The Torah says that Noach was a tzaddik, that he found favor in God's eyes, that he walked with God. Pretty big compliments. But it's expressed in a little unusual wording. It says, Noach was a tzaddik in his generation. And there are two opinions among the sages what that means. One opinion is that he was a tzaddik in a time when there were no other. It was a generation that was really, really bad. And yet he was a tzaddik, which is a great compliment to him. He wasn't just a regular tzaddik. He was a tzaddik in a time when nobody else was. Imagine what kind of a tzaddik he would have been if he lived in a time where other tzaddikim lived. The other opinion is the exact opposite. He was a tzaddik in his generation. Compared to the other people, he was a tzaddik. But if he had been a tzaddik in another generation, he wouldn't have been anything special. Opposite opinions. The lesson behind it is, Noach was absolutely a tzaddik because Torah says he was a tzaddik. Not only compared to his generation, because that wouldn't make him a real tzaddik. And Torah says he was a real tzaddik. So he was. What is a real tzaddik? He does everything God commands him to do. He doesn't violate any of God's commandments. He walks with God. Very impressive. But he built the ark over 120 years. That's how long it took. He was in no hurry. And the reason for that was so that people could stop and ask him, what are you doing? So that he can tell them that there's going to be a flood and inspire them to come into the ark with him. In 120 years, not one person, besides his own family, his sons and their wives, nobody got on the ark. Nobody, not one person. Which means that Noach was not very effective in influencing others. So personally, as an individual, he was absolutely a tzaddik. But he was a tzaddik in his private life. In his effect on others, there was very little. Now we're introduced to Avraham. And the first thing we find out about Avraham is that he created an entire community of people who he inspired to believe in one God. Doesn't say he was a tzaddik. It says he influenced others, which means in addition to being a tzaddik, he was also effective in his social responsibilities. To put it in different words, in the times of Noach, the challenge was to be good and not be sinful. That was the highest degree of godliness that was available at that time. So when the Torah says he was a tzaddik in his generation, it means he used all the godliness that was available at that time. Because God becomes more and more available as time goes on. For the time of Noach, the godliness that was available was personal. And Noach lived up to the full potential of what was available at that time. You might say, like a child before bar mitzvah. What's a good child? A good child obeys the parents, never rebels, always does what's right, is respectful, but he's a child. He is a perfect child. But you can't expect him to go influence other people. He's a child. So you might say Noach was like a child tzaddik. That's why he wasn't given any additional responsibilities or additional mitzvot, additional commandments. He was told not to be cruel to animals. This is something a child needs to learn. So Noach, even when he was 600 years old, was a tzaddik with a childlike innocence. And that was perfect for that time. The world got older, so it was ready for more responsibility. So in the times of Avraham, it wasn't enough anymore to be a tzaddik by yourself. It became necessary to teach others and inspire others. Why did it become necessary? Because it was now possible. And if it's possible, you have to do it. What happened after that? Now Avraham is like a bar mitzvah boy. He now has additional commandments. What commandment was given to Avraham? Circumcision. That was the beginning of the giving of the Torah. Torah, of course, is all 613 commandments. But the one commandment that was given to Avraham, in addition to the 7 Noahide laws, the one mitzvah that he was given was circumcision. But it's a mitzvah from the Torah that was given to Avraham because Avraham was the beginning of the revelation of the Torah. With every new generation, more godliness became available. More godliness becomes available, more commandments become necessary. So where are we today? Now that we've had the entire Torah for 3,000 years, now it's time that the truth of the Torah should be understood and appreciated by non-Jews, but specifically non-Jews who do not follow the Bible. Godliness now has to spread beyond the book. I don't know if that makes sense, but you have great books in your library, on your shelf. You've read them, you've studied them. They're great books. And they inspire and they give good advice. But it's just a book on the shelf. The next step is that what it says in the book should become your reality. You become what it says in the book. So that it stops just being a book. It becomes life itself. Not every book can do that. People study Shakespeare. It's brilliant. It's inspiring. People study Aristotle. Brilliant, inspiring, but it remains a book on the shelf. Reading Shakespeare doesn't mean that you should become Shakespearean. It's not a life. It's good ideas about life. Aristotle had some very good ideas about life, but he didn't live his own teachings because they were not livable. They were just great ideas. Torah is not just great ideas. Torah is life. What it says in the Torah is meant to be lived, not just read and studied. So in the sweep of history, there were 2,000 years from Adam until Avraham, 2,000 years, 20 generations, where people were just learning how to be people, how to be decent human beings. They were very bright. There was never a time when human beings were not intelligent, highly intelligent. But they didn't know what life was. So they experimented. And when you don't have rules and you're going to experiment to find out what life is, it can get pretty crazy. And it was crazy. So those 2,000 years are described as 2,000 years of chaos, craziness. It's like childhood, adolescence. You're trying to figure out what life is. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to figure out what you're capable of. You're discovering yourself, and that comes through experiment. So it's a crazy time. Luckily, we have parents. We have rules of society by now that kind of keep us from destroying ourselves as children in those experiments. Noach was right in the middle of that period of those 2,000 years. So he was kind of the turning point. For 10 generations until Noach, people had no idea what it takes to be a decent human being, a healthy human being. By the time Noach came around, it became clear. Now it was a matter of improving and fine-tuning the art of being a human being. Now God comes to Avram, and he says, the human race has become mature, has become disciplined. They're ready to learn a higher wisdom. I will teach you, and you will teach them. So, what is the new ingredient? The new ingredient is, for 2,000 years, people were trying to be the best human beings that they can be. Now God says to Avraham, that's good. You should be the best human being you could be, but that's not what I created you for. I created you to be something more than human. So leave your home, leave your parents, leave your birthplace, and come to the land that I will show you. See, that's the transition. Stop trying to be a good human. Try to become godly by serving God through the commandments. And one commandment was given to Avraham, just to start him off. But that is a radical change. It's a huge change to go from being a human being to being godly. So with beginning with Avraham, we really started to serve God. We were mature, we were intelligent, we were wise by now, and now it was time to serve God. To take all our human talents, and we have many, and devote them all to serving God. That took 2,000 years. From the giving of the Torah at Sinai until the miracle of Purim and the rebuilding of the temple. That's called 2,000 years of Torah. And then when the second temple was destroyed, the next 2,000-year period began. Because all of history is 6,000 years. 2,000 years of chaos till Avraham, 2,000 years of Torah until Purim, and now 2,000 years of Mashiach. Preparation for Mashiach, getting prepared, getting worthy, all the things that we need to do to bring Mashiach. That's the next 2,000 years, which began 1,900 years ago. I'm not sure the math works out perfectly, but that's 2,000 years of getting ready for Mashiach. And that began with the destruction of the Second Temple. In these 2,000 years, we were tested in every virtue. We were tested in our belief. Will you still worship idols? We suffered, but we proved that we're not going to go with the idols. We were tested to see how kind we are. How do you test that? Make everybody poor and hungry and see if they'll still give charity. Not from leftover disposable cash. When they have no disposable cash, will they feed the poor? Okay, we did that for about 500 years. So we are making real progress. We are in the 2,000 years of Mashiach. That's why there is suffering. That's why there's an urgency to get things done, because we don't want to keep Mashiach waiting, even though he kept us waiting 2,000 years. But okay, we'll forgive him, as long as he just comes already. So the other thing we need to do is take a more specific look, a more detailed look at the 2,000 years of Torah, and then take a look at the 2,000 years of Mashiach. That is next on the agenda.